Well, hello. I'm so excited today. We are interviewing one of my favorite people in the world, Jim Moran, who is not only a successful entrepreneur and top salesperson, but I have known him all of my life. He is also my brother.
I was
Uh,
going to say, you look familiar.
and he has agreed to speak with us today. I'm hoping to learn some tips from him as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were going to tell some funny stories about Erin when she was growing up.
We have an editor for that.
Well, thanks for having me, Erin, and I'm glad. I'd love to share a little bit of the background and the things I've learned in sales, and hopefully it's helpful for your audience. Just a quick background, I guess, on my story is I was in technology sales right out of college, worked for MCI, the long distance phone company, and then went work for Motorola, started a business with a friend of mine in the year about 2003, moved out to Park City, started a whole new career in real estate, also in sales. And we'll kind of go through some of the stories and background on that and some things I've learned, and hopefully it helps. But obviously, I know you have questions too. So I mentioned the first job I had at MCI, which first job out of college, and one of the stories I remember about that is when I was interviewing for the job. The person I was interviewing, I was 22. The woman hiring me was 26. And she asked me, why are you ready to start your career now versus taking the summer off? And why are you motivated? And I said, I probably wouldn't say this now, but I said, well, I'm tired of watching Gilligan's Island reruns. And luckily, I think it was the point that we're going to talk about is to make things fun, make it interesting, things they'll remember. And I did get the job. So I was in Boston at the Prudential Center calling businesses in New York, and it was 80 to 100 phone calls a day, just dialing, calling. So in terms of good sales experience, that's about as good as you can get.
Yeah.
But what I would take away from that is that the number one thing I learned is don't take rejection personally. You've got a product to sell. You're hoping it's going to fit for the other person, the other business. And if it does, great, you'll get further into it. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Once in a while, you are going to get the person that yells at you because they might have been called 3 or 4 times before. They might yell at you for different reasons. All I can tell you is it's not fun, but just don't take it personally.
And Jim, I think that's one of the biggest things I hear. I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and sales is always a sticking point, right? They're always talking about getting in that mindset, or I'm afraid to sell, or I'm afraid to talk to those customers. When you're starting your day and you have all these calls to make, and the first few don't go well, and people are hanging up on you and giving you in that negative state, what do you tell yourself? How do you keep that motivation around? You might know you're going to get rejections, but how do you dial again? How do you keep yourself in the right mindset?
So it's funny because after doing it enough, it doesn't even bother you anymore. It's not it. I think it's for the people that maybe haven't sold their whole life or just new to sales. Yes, for the first, whether it's couple of days, couple of weeks, or couple of months, if you're only making a 1 or 2 phone calls a day or 1 or 2 appointments a day, it is a little intimidating, and you'll fear rejection. Oh, I should have said that, and what if I had said this, or and that's okay. But it'll get to a point, I promise, with some practice. And so one of the ways you can do it is just kind of practice with your friends, whether it's knocking on the door or just actually calling them on the phone and going through and having them ask the real questions. But as you practice, it gets to the point where you don't even think twice about it. One of my favorite shows, and I know it's one of yours, is Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And if I love that show, and if you watch it, the most important thing, and that's what they'll tell you, is selling is one of the most important things. I mean, you've got this great product, but it's not only selling the product, but it's selling yourself.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to. One of the things people want to see if they're going to buy something or promote you, or and with my business, I had to interview and hire people, and there was a lot of things that we could train people to do. But one of the things on the actual job, but one of the things I want to see is how excited was that person about this company? Because if it's just about the money or just about something else, they might leave in a couple of months. But if I saw somebody that was really excited about the company, I saw that they had done their research, the knowledge about the product or the company or the position, and they were very excited about it and could tell me why they were excited, that's what we wanted to see. And that's what you'll see on Shark Tank too. Half of it is the enthusiasm that people have for the product, how hard they're working. The guys that just want it for the money, that usually doesn't work out too well.
So you're buying the person as well as the product, right? So it's
100%. I mean,
yeah.
one of my first jobs at Motorola, and I remember we had gone through this 8-month training program. We did a few months in distributor sales, a few months in catalog sales, a few months in service. And when we were done, the main person sat us down and he said, okay, so tell me, what are you selling? And this was a technology field. So it would say these statistical multiplexers or switches or routers. No, what are you selling? I mean, it went on for 5 minutes, but he was making the point. I never forgot it. He goes, you're selling yourself. And the number one thing he said is people buy from people. And so just like, if you go into Best Buy and somebody's pushing hard, you really should buy this TV. This is the best TV. I think this is, you're kind of like, whoa, something's wrong.
Yeah.
But if you make that connection, if you build that trust, people are going to buy from people, you'll get the referrals, things like that. So that's the other thing. You're selling yourself. Sometimes the process will go wrong, whether you're selling your boss for a promotion or selling a product, but over time, it'll get better. What I did is I got a little creative at MCI. There were 35 salespeople in this department, all making phone calls. And rather than just jumping in, I kind of said, okay, so tell me about how it works. What we did is put these dialers in the basement of a business. If they signed up for MCI, as long as they were doing $150 a month in long distance, we could put this dialer. What they used to have to do is dial a 10-digit phone number, then a passcode, then the phone number they wanted, but they would go out over the MCI network and save a lot of money. We put in these dialers that in businesses that would automatically dial it. So it was much quicker and easier, and it was easy for business. So I said, well, how much is it to install it? And they said, well, nothing. We'll install it for free. I said, and what if they decide not to use it or they don't hit the 150 after a couple of months? Like, well, we just take it out. I said, okay. Made my first phone call. Hi, we're offering a free trial offer, this and that. In the first month, I became the number one sales rep out of 35 without having a quota. And it wasn't that I was that good. I still had issues and problems, but it was just the creative side where it made the decision easy for the person to buy.
I think that's a great point, Jim, about getting in that mindset of you don't have to be complicated with the switch and the loader and the dials and things that people just kind of gloss over. Like, hey, it's free. We make your phone calls easier. You don't like it, we take it out. So it becomes, like you say, it's easy for them to buy. Like, wait, so no money, and you're getting in that mindset of the buyer.
Yeah.
Like if you were selling to yourself, what would your questions be?
Right. And it was just the thought of being creative. There was another story. I have a friend of mine, his name's Kenny. He was working for a courier service, and there was
like
a big
UPS or
yeah, but it was a local courier service where within Southern California, if you had to deliver packages, which they did all the time from one business to another, or packages or letters, you would call this courier service and they would deliver it. So there was a big company, it was a healthcare company, and they were going to make a decision. He was late to the game. The decision maker said, hey, we've been doing this for 3 months. We've narrowed it down to our final 3. Somehow he worked it, kept pushing, and they said, okay, but you've got to have the presentation. We're doing the presentations this week. So Kenny learned as much as he could about their business. They had the meeting. And so in the middle of this meeting, there was a conference table. There were 8 people around, and there was a knock on the door while they're in the middle of this meeting. And it was someone from Kenny's company that they had worked out, and it was Orange Coast Courier. And so person knocks on the door, opens up, says, very sorry to interrupt the meeting. I have an important package here for it was Apria Healthcare, I'll just say that team. And he takes this package and puts it on the middle of the table and says, again, sorry to disrupt, but appreciate it, walks out. So Kenny, and first thing Kenny said was, again, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to show you our drivers, how they dress for delivery. They have them in a uniform. And he said, and we have something special in this box for you that will open up at the end of the meeting. Well, he goes on with the he knew what he was doing. He's going on with the presentation. Everyone is asking the questions. Everyone's interested in his company. Everyone wants to know what the heck is in that box.
What's in the box? Yeah.
What's in the box, right? So he has their attention. They're listening to everything because he kind of would reference the box here and there, whatever. And so anyways, but the short story is, it's just the thought of being creative.
You got to tell us what was in the box.
I'll get there. So you want to know, but everyone else that had the PowerPoints, which is great, and had, some good bullet points that they're talking about, and that's great, but it was the thought of being creative. So inside that box, he had a magnetic sign they had made which says Apria Healthcare delivery in progress, that they basically said, we're going to put on the side of every car that as we do the deliveries for your company, Apria. Kenny got the business, massive deal. And again, it's just this thought of being creative, fun, it goes a long way. So,
I think one of the things what I hear so often with people, oh, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to pushy comes right. The typical like that car salesman, that pushy sales, aggressive, sort of that negative stereotype.
And so I think some of that comes the part of being pushy, which I hate. That's never worked for me. I don't now in terms of I'm trying to think of another word, but it's like in terms of follow up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of, getting their answers quickly. If I say I'm going to do something, we do it right away. If we say we're going to follow up, we follow up right away. We might do handwritten notes. I mean, there's all of these things, but sometimes I think being pushy comes from you don't have enough information as the person selling. So you're trying to force somebody to do it because it's not a good fit. The other thing I would say, and one of my bullet points is I said, sometimes it's okay. We have to say no too, as the salesperson. If it's not a good fit, that's okay. Help them out. People will ask us, again, going back to selling real estate, where they would say, okay, get me a list of all of the land that's available for sale. Then get me a list of all of the homes that are available for sale. Now compare this to that. Do the and it's like that person, I've seen it before. They're never going to buy, and that's okay. And you could say it in a nice way. We're like, hey, I don't think this is a good fit because why don't we wait until you're ready to decide if you want to buy land or a house? And when you decide that, let's decide what area you want to be in. But sometimes people, and I can see some other people are like, oh, and they asked for this. And I spent 3 days getting them this. Then they ask, and sometimes it's like saying, you know what, just like you don't want to pressure somebody to buy, sometimes it's not a good fit for us. And that's a tough thing is when somebody says they want to buy and they're pressuring you to do all this information, get this, and they're just never going to buy it. So we have to say no sometimes too. So
that's a great point. Or if they're just stringing you along, or perhaps they're not even a decision maker themselves, right? They're saying, hey, do all this work and you're doing all this work, jumping through all these hoops. And they're like, oh, we're not quite ready to buy. Or so much of it, I think, as you're saying, is learning how to step back a little bit and understand, who you're talking with, what they actually need. Do you have the information? Even in your story with Kenny, he had to kind of push his way to get the call, right? They said, oh, we already have enough bidders. You're too late to the game. And so he had to be pushy to get in.
right.
But that made sense, right? He's like, no, this is an opportunity. It's worth it to get my shot.
And I guess there's a little distinction between saying pushy in order to at least get the opportunity, which I'm all for. We definitely push them. But in terms of if it's not a good fit and you're pushing and pushing, then that's a little different. And again, a lot of that comes down to is we don't have enough information. So the biggest thing I have kind of written down is ask questions, then ask more questions, and then get as much information as you can before you start presenting. Going back to the car salesman, if somebody's coming in to buy a car and you're trying to sell, maybe there's a bonus to sell this one car. It's $1,000 bonus and so the person's trying to sell that car and pushing. It's like, well, we don't know whether this person wants a sports car, whether they want an SUV, whether they want, is the most important thing to lease it? Is the most important thing that they have to buy it before the end of the year for tax? So if you're just, if you quickly say, what kind of car do you like? And they're like, well, what do you have? Like, you've just got to ask questions and more questions. And so I'll give you another example. So in the technology side, one of the companies we started with a good friend of mine, we sold voice and data communications and cabling and some things like that. And so we had a client that they used a lot of products from this one company. It was called 3Com at the time. And we brought 3Com into this account. Well, I found out through the grapevine that they were about to do a huge upgrade of their network. And 3Com was going to try to take this direct rather than bringing us in as the partner, even though we had brought them in originally. So I had to quickly get as much information as I could. So I called the contacts that I had worked with and they said, Jim, it's too late. They said, we're issuing the purchase order. We've already made this big decision. And I said, okay, well, just tell me a little bit about what's going on with the project. And without getting too much into detail, basically they were going to upgrade all their wiring to this fiber type of wiring. And, it was pretty complicated. And we said, hey, I've got another option that I just want to run by you. Well, the 3Com people were in the computer area where all of this was going on. So we had to walk around the back of the building to go in this side door so the 3Com technicians wouldn't see us. And we went in with a new partner called Cisco, which at the time was new, and now Cisco Systems is huge. But what we did is we really tried to understand what was going on. And they talked about how we were on the network side, but they had just done a massive upgrade on their computer system because they did a study that showed they lose $20,000 an hour every time when their network is down, from not being able to place orders, from their salespeople to operations, everything. And so again, it was asking the questions, how does this work? How about that? How about this? And so we basically said, we have a solution where you don't have to take out all your wiring. This new technology can run 10 times as fast on the existing wiring, and we can make it fully redundant, which was important to them.
No downtime.
So they said, okay, let me check. So we found out the PO had been issued under the purchasing, but the woman in purchasing was sick. And so she hadn't sent it to 3Com yet. So we said, hold it for 2 days. So they said, okay, well, the purchase order was written for, $330,000. So just don't come in higher than $330,000 and we can do this. And I said, okay, great. 2 days later, so we had the proposal for them. Our proposal came in at $502,000. And he said, Jim,
my math may be off. I think that's a little higher than 330, right?
Right. And he said, what are you doing? We told you, don't come. We can't get this approved. I said, you just spent $1 million on the backup system for the computers. And if the network fails, what good was the backup on the computer? So we're doing a fully redundant system. We don't change the wiring. The next day we had a purchase order for $502,000, done deal. And so that one it's kind of a fun thing where we walk in the back door, but it was more about really understanding the network and how it was important. And they might have told us something, we can't spend that money, but yet knowing that they'll lose $20,000 an hour, we made the system fully redundant, and so we had a great relationship with them for years after that. And I called the 3Com sales rep and asked him what happened. So it's kind of,
that goes to your success, Jim, is really understanding what's the pain point, what's the problem you're solving.
right.
I talk to a lot of my entrepreneurs and say, if you think of it as solving, not selling, right? Asking all those questions, where is your pain? What is the problem? Oh, $20,000 an hour. Now downtime. Now that big pain point, and redundancy is so important. Now you can say, hey, we could fix that piece of it. It made me think of asking the questions. It'd be like going into a doctor's office and the doctor starts saying, oh, you want to take aspirin? Does your knee hurt? Can you not sleep? Instead of just trying to sell something before you need to diagnose the problem. Where does it hurt? When does it hurt? What happened the last time you were doing this, right? Same in sales. How do you get to the meat of what the problem and where's the pain? So that then you can say, oh, take 2 aspirin, right? Or get your appendix out, So,
another problem that people new to sales kind of have is they go through this training, and whether it's on the product or the company, whatever they're selling, and they get fed all this information, which is great. They memorize it, they've learned it, and it's all this information in their head. And one of the first things they want to do when they get in front of a client, customer, or their boss is let them know all of this information that they have in their head. The product does this, and it does that, and it does this, and unfortunately, that's the worst thing you can do, right? It's kind of, the nice thing is you've got to have all of that knowledge in your head in order to understand, what's going to be a good fit, who it's going to be a good fit for, how it works. But the best thing you do is let the customer or the client or the boss do 80. It's always this 80-20 rule, right? They should do 80% of the talking. You should do 20% of the talking. So 80% of the time, I'm asking questions and listening so I can understand what's important to you. The other thing I always kind of do in negotiations or sales is put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm working with to say, know before we're going in, whether again, it's the next boss or if it's a client buying real estate, I always try to put myself in their shoes to say, what questions or objections are they going to have? Pretend I'm them and say, and then how would I address them? So if it's someone going for promotion, if I put myself in my boss's shoes, they're going to say, we don't have the money, or you haven't been here long enough. Or if I promote you, I have to promote the next person, versus saying, so now you can go and say, but what's important to that person? What if we help create, solve a problem or can take on more work or to do, whatever it is, but find out what's important for them and it makes it much easier.
That's a great point. What do you have sort of a standard list of basic questions you would ask, if somebody's new in sales, or we didn't really preface this at the beginning. You don't have to be in sales to need to be good at sales, right? Sales can come in all forms. You could be trying to sell yourself to get that new promotion, or like you're saying, or take on that big project, whatever it is. But when you're first starting to sell or having that initial conversation, do you have a set of people should, learn a few key questions, or,
I mean, it kind of
general?
depends on what you're doing in terms of which questions, but the thing that I would say is important is to make sure you ask open-ended questions,
Yeah.
rather than just is this, if it starts with is this what you're looking for? That's a yes or a no. Do you want that's a yes or no, versus say, tell me about this. And so you can really kind of understand. So as an example, there's one development I worked called Promontory. It's about 7,000 acre property, 1,700 homes, huge development. And one of the things that we would do is, as you drive along the ridge up in Park City, one side had great views of the ski resorts and the sunsets, but you did look over a lot of the homes below you. And if you look to the east, it was a lot of open space, beautiful open mountains. And it's just funny. Some people, people were very specific of what they liked. But as we would drive that top of the ridge, I would kind of say, if you were to do something, which kind of views do you like better? And people would absolutely say, oh, I absolutely want the sunset views and the ski resorts. Other people would say, I'm in, New York or Chicago. I see a ton of buildings. I love the views and the privacy towards the east. Well, that was a very quick way of splitting everything I had to determine in half of. So I don't want to show them properties on the side that face the ski resorts. And then there was another question we would do the same thing about, in terms of, do they want land so that they can build the house on their own? Or do they want something done if they've never built before? So rather than showing them a lot on the west facing side,
Yeah.
thinking it's the best lot at the best deal, that's not what they want. Versus saying, okay, so then we can kind of focus in. And again, that's not tricking somebody. But that's saying that takes a lot of that pushiness that some people, because with not knowing the information, now that we start to know this information, and it's not, so if I show you this, are you going to buy it? I mean, I guess that some people do it that way, and that's okay. My thing was, the less forceful you did, you pushed it, they realized that you weren't, again, the guy at Best Buy trying to say, do you want this TV? If that TV did this, would you buy it? Or, it's kind of like, hey, it's almost like you're leading them to show, this is such a good fit. If you want this is the right fit. If you don't want it, that's okay. And, we'll move on. But
And you spent the time understanding what's really in their mindset. The more you ask, the more okay, what do I focus on? Where's their pain? What's their pleasure? Like, oh, and so then it's easy, right? If they did come to buy, it's your job to kind of narrow it down and say, oh, well, our product, our thing does this. It's solving that problem for you. Do you like the big or the small, right? So then it's just.
Now we're going to throw a little wrench into the equation here, where sometimes what they tell you is not really accurate. So what I mean by that is, we'd have some people that would say, I don't want to be on the golf course, so don't show me any properties on the golf course. And normally you'd say, okay, great. I log that in the back of your head and keep going. But sometimes you have to ask, because what that really means, it sometimes is, I've lived on a golf course before, and I've gotten golf balls through my window, and I don't want that again, and which is absolutely understandable. But what it might mean is, although if I was up above a golf course where I was never going to, the view is up higher, and even if I'm on the course, but I'm never going to get a golf because I'm behind the tee boxes or whatever it is. If I would love that view, and I'd love the open space of the golf course. I just don't want to get any golf balls. Like, okay, but if I could, but it also might mean, hey, I don't want people on the course looking in at my house. And so they really might mean, I don't want the golf course. So sometimes you got to kind of ask a few more questions to make sure that what they're saying, that you understand what they're really saying. Yeah.
I love that. And it goes back to your open-ended questions, right? Oh, I don't want this. Well, why? Right? Tell me why,
Exactly.
So then as you're asking those open-ended questions, you getting those key, oh gosh, okay, well, what if, a golf ball could never come through your window? Oh, I hadn't thought about that, right? So, like you say, it's really about is getting going as deep as you can to answer some of those questions to give you as much info what's really going behind their answers.
Another thing I was kind of thinking about on the real estate side. So one of the places I worked was a resort called Victory Ranch, where I was a director of sales and hired the sales team on. And the previous year, they had sold 9 properties. This was a new developer. They bought it out of bankruptcy. It was funny. This was almost about the same acreage as the Promontory, and this is all up in Park City. But this community was about 6,700 acres. They were only going to have 350 properties, so it was much smaller because they had a lot more open space. They were on the river, beautiful development. And the new developers, the year previously that I had started, this was 2014, they had sold 9 properties. And the first year we came on, I brought my team on, we sold 52 properties. And so part of that was just understanding really the process. And what we quickly found out was a lot of the buyers, I think we did a good job and we trained people how to understand it. But some of it was just understanding the business side, because the biggest problem we found, I was kind of analyzing what was going on, was that the developers were big commercial real estate brokers out of Chicago, and they weren't really used to the residential real estate, and they were deal makers. And so people would come in, and on these lots that we would sell, the lots were kind of 600,000, or at the time it was probably 400,000 to 1.5 million. And the homes were kind of in the 1.5 million to 4 million. Now those same homes are kind of in the 3.5 to $10 million. But they would make deals with everybody that came in. So if somebody said, okay, the lot is $700,000, and they'd say, okay, what if I give you 625? And they'd work these deals. And so the problem was they were making it difficult for the people to make the decision. We talked about earlier how if you can make it as easy as possible for the people to make their decision, that's half the battle. And so it was
And
really
they started saying, "Oh, should I buy? Should I build? Should it get
yeah.
complicated?"
Part of it on the buy process was because if somebody said 625 and it was 700 and they came back at 760 and you're negotiating, the first thing in their mind they're wondering is, well, wait a minute, but did the guy next to me get a better deal? Should I have gone lower? Well, let me just back off for a week and let me ask some people. And so what we did, as I said, the first thing, and this was tough for the developer to understand, but they quickly got it said, the price has to be fixed. We have to fix this price. And no matter if it's 700,000, the price is 700,000. And if they say, I'll give you 690, hey, I appreciate it. The price is 700,000. And what we did is we had incentives, but they were fixed for everybody. So what we would do is to say, this is the price. But what we do right now is we're offering incentive. It's $20,000 in club credits, as an example.
Yeah.
So what that just meant is the person buying it would go onto their account and they could use those club credits for food or drinks or clothing. And they loved it because what was great for the developer. So again, this is part of how I sold it to them, which was it's great for the developer because if you just give them $50,000 off the price, they forget it the day after they've purchased it.
Yeah.
If you give them 20,000 or whatever, however many club credits, they remember it. They buy their friends drinks.
Now they're the big guy buying everybody a drink in the clubhouse.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have people buying the clothes at the store with the logoed clothes. Yeah. And it only costs the developer 40 cents on the dollar because it's food and drink and beverage. If I give them a $40,000 or a $50,000 discount as the developer, the developer is losing 50,000 out of their pocket. It also hurts the future sales because you've lowered the price. And so if that's sold for 650, how do you sell the next one for 700,000? Right. So it was a great fit all around. But then that goes back to really understanding the business, the people, what's important to the developer. And it made great sense for them. And it made it what's important for the buyer, which is to say, how do I know I'm getting the right deal? Because everybody's getting this deal.
I love that. It's a lot of what I'm taking away too is there's a lot of homework. There's a lot of kind of psychology, mindset, understanding both what people are thinking, what buyers are thinking, what sellers are thinking, understanding all of that before you ever start a conversation.
Absolutely. It's funny where, and I think it's a little different where it's so easy on the internet, but to know that you could go into a meeting and you haven't looked at their website, looked at what's important to them. Actually, my son, Kyle, who when he was applying for a job at a company called Skull Candy, his first like internship when he was in college. It's here in Park City. They'd make the headphones. And so as you go through their website and you can see what's important to them. And one of the things they kept talking about over and over was they live the brand. What's important to them is that you could have somebody that's a great salesperson, but if they're a Wall Street guy, that's not who they want.
Right.
Really selling and living the brand of these headphones that are kind of, it's all about the marketing, what's kind of cool and hip with the younger crowd. And so in Kyle's cover letter, that was what he focused on, was talking, mentioned it, that, not exactly those words because we wanted to make sure, but talk about living the brand of how he was a freestyle skier, how he's used the product, how, and so he did get that. So like you said, it's all the homework that can go into this. You've got all the knowledge up there. And remember, it's there. What's important to the other buyer?
Yeah.
Ask all the questions. You're only talking 20% of the time. You're listening 80% of the time. And when it comes time for you to make your pitch or your presentation, you can focus it towards what's important to that buyer, because the next buyer that comes in, it might be something totally different. So again, going back to Victory Ranch, we had young couples, and what's important to them were all the family amenities. We also had retired couples that some did have grandkids, some didn't. And so all the kids things weren't important to them. And actually, it could be a drawback if you keep focusing on all of these kids things where they don't want to, just like sometimes in a cruise, some people want to be near the kids in the cruise, other people don't. And so maybe what's important to the retired couple was talking about the river and fishing and hiking things, so again, knowing your audience and what's important to them.
One of the things too is, so how are you finding these people, right? So I was just talking to someone the other day who was telling me about this guy who's just started up this company. And, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they fall in love with their own product. They love creating. They're, in the garage building this really great thing before they've ever talked to a customer, or they're not even quite sure who's going to buy this, right? Their mom told them it was great, and they're building away. They've yet to find a customer, know who their customer is, and then if you know who it is, how do you actually reach them? I mean, how do you find the right people for your product?
Well, that's a tough one, because if you're building a product and you don't know who it's for, I think that's a problem. So, because you really got to know your demographic to say what and how are we building this for. And part of that comes down to it depends on the product. It could be different things. I can tell you though, the number one thing I would say is networking. Doing it on your own, one by one, is tough, and sometimes you have to do that. But what I would do is, as you're building this product, go out to your friends, family, get the feedback. What do they like? What don't they like? And one of the problems that I've had in a few little entrepreneurial side projects I've had on my own too is it's tough because you get it in your head. This is what I want, and this is the vision. Sometimes you have to stick to that, but it's also, if everyone's telling you something, you might want to kind of listen. But so example, in real estate, at one of these resorts we were at, that was one of the problems. Some of the people before us, they would focus on just their connections. And what they didn't realize was that in our little town of Park City, there are 1,100 real estate agents. Whoa. So I can reach out to each individual buyer, which sometimes you do. And it's funny, I did make a cold call to one of the top guys at Goldman Sachs in Salt Lake City that ended up buying as a cold call, which is crazy at a resort. But it's much easier to work this networking. And so for us, it was these realtors. So we would have events where we would invite all the realtors out. We'd give them these great jackets, or when we were opening up a new spa at the resort, we gave them these waffle bathrobes, and they know we're going to feed them well. And we're also going to make a little presentation about what's new, the release, the incentives for realtors. So rather than my sales team of 5 trying to reach out to buyers, we try to hit that group of 1,100 realtors, and each one of them, if they only have, and again, I would say we invite everybody, we treat them, because you never know, but it's only, again, kind of that 80-20 rule. 20% of those realtors are the top ones that you want to go after. So if you only have a limited budget, get the best of the best. But each of those realtors probably have a network of 300 to 400 or more clients. That's who if you can get those guys, all of a sudden now you've got the potential of several thousand of their clients that might be interested. And so part of it sometimes is taking a step back and saying, okay, I've got all this information. Before I start dialing or going to someone's door, say, let's look at this from the outside. How else could I get the product into the hands of people.
It goes to, I hear a lot of people will say, oh, I sent 3 emails, I didn't hear back, I gave up. At what point do you say, you got to reach out, you got to actually talk to somebody?
Do you know which salespeople don't pick up the phone? Are the ones that aren't comfortable picking up the phone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I get it. It's like I said, not just me, but anyone that's been in sales for a couple of years or more, that you don't even think twice. It's not, I might send, I mean, I'm saying, yes, you can send an email first. Yes, you can do whatever. But if I'm trying to reach this, the person I just mentioned at Goldman Sachs was partly because the developer that I was working for said, hey, we want to get some of these high profile people, make some calls to the top executives. And I was like, it's never going to happen. You can't call somebody to see if they want to buy a second home. But I did. And what
Once in a
happened,
while it works. Yeah.
I couldn't even find, I had to do all the research to find out, I won't say the person's name, but who this top executive was, the main guy for Goldman Sachs in Salt Lake City. Kept researching, I finally found the person's name, finally made a couple of phone calls to get the number, and I couldn't reach him. So I called after hours. So I think it was 5:45 one night. He picks up the phone
Yeah.
and started from there, invited him up, and kind of went from there. So that's what I would say is, yes, you definitely want to reach out to as many people as you can. And the easiest way to do that is through email and posting and LinkedIn and all of those things. But at the point where people buy from people,
Yeah.
right? That email, that LinkedIn connection is still, I look like everybody else
Right.
until this person knows and hears my voice and we can kind of connect on something. And it doesn't always work. And they might say, yeah, I'm not looking for a second, and that's okay.
So let's say you are either following up with somebody that you had connected with, 3 months ago, or you've been trying to get this new client. When you're first making that initial call, again, speaking back to that mindset or that overcoming the fear of rejection or whatever it is, and especially if it's somebody who's not expecting your call, how do you approach those kind of calls when it sounded like initially you would try to get a network or try to get a connection that somebody said, hey, they've made some soft introduction. But if you have none of that, if you're truly starting fresh and you have to, call these 10 people that don't know you, that aren't expecting your call, any thoughts on how to make that initial connection more successful?
If you're saying, like, if you tried to say, if this is not a follow-up from an email, if you're just trying to make the phone call for the first time, it depends on, again, so if this is an important client that a larger client that you really want to try to get, again, I would go back to something you mentioned, but I would say first, make sure we're talking with the right person, because there's other times you can spend a lot of time impressing and getting all the right information from somebody and they're not the right decision maker. So that's the other thing. So I would also learn about that company, see what is their problem. If they're going to buy your product, is it to save them time? Is it to save them money? Most people, so if you're selling software, if you're selling, which I've sold as well, or hardware, or a product or service, they probably already have a product or a service that works for them now. So you're hoping that yours is either the other product is old and about to be replaced, but if not, you've got to figure out how is your product going to either save them time or save them money or both, or why would they switch to begin with? So
I'm going to go with an
all that
untrusted, proven product that causes me a headache. It might be way better, but I don't want the headache of changing. So you're battling a lot.
Right. And so that's one of those things where hopefully you can try to figure out what their price points, their pain points are based on other companies in their industry, which might be a service issue where I understand that one of the biggest issues was your warranties. And so if we had a way to reduce your warranty claims by 5 to 10%, like we've done for these other companies, can I take 30 seconds to explain how that works? And so if you don't have if you've got to do something to kind of catch their attention. Hopefully you can ask an open-ended question. Can I ask you, how does it work now? Again, some people are going to say, hey, call me later. But so part of it too is it's a numbers game, right? I mean, you got to call as many as you can. And again, when you get somebody that's interested, focus on that. And then the other thing I would say is one of the things newer salespeople have the problem with is asking for the order or the request, whatever it is, a promotion, whatever, asking for it. Like you kind of you've hinted around this thing is like,
Yeah.
don't we need somebody to fill this project? Or Mr. Customer, don't you need all these things? But there's a point where you've got to ask for the order and you've got to ask for the right way. And then the other thing that I've seen is where people ask for the order, people say, okay, great, let's sign it up. And then the salespeople keep talking. I mean, the number one thing I can tell people, because I've seen deals go sideways, is that they get the order, the person either is ready to sign, looking for the paperwork, and the person keeps talking, and all of a sudden they mention a competitor. It's like, well, wait a minute, what about that? That delays things. Or they get the order and then they keep talking and saying, oh, well, yeah, there's other fees. I mean, again, all of that should be up front.
Yeah.
But that's why I say get the order, thank them very much, and then
You get the sale, stop talking, right? I love that scene in Moneyball with Brad Pitt, and he's making all those trades, and he's talking. He's like, "Okay, I'll get that new center fielder. Okay, great," and hangs up. And Jonah Hill said, "Oh, he's gonna, he was gonna say something else." I was like, "Hey, no, you get the sale, you just stop talking."
Yeah, yeah. Because there'll be a lot of conversations that go on past that, but as a person's buying, that's when they're always concerned and hesitant. You have that buyer's remorse, and so again, make sure you've answered all their questions. That's one of the things. Are there any questions you have? I want to make sure we address everything. Go through all those things. Say, great, it sounds like it's a good fit. I mean, is this something that we're ready to get started on today? However it is, and I know that sounds a little harsh. The thing of saying, but that's at the point where you've answered the questions. But I never preface it with if. We found a house for you would you buy it today or this car today? We don't do that. It's just kind of I've always
the natural flow of things. I've seen that a lot where people are making a presentation. They're excited about the product. They're, this beautiful presentation. And as you're saying, at some point, push has to come to shove, right? At some point you have to say, you have to close. Hey, ask for the sale, ask for the order. Great. Would you like the small or the large, or two or three?
Oh, exactly. You do a presentation in front of this group, and you tell all the things about your company, all the things about your product, all the things, and everything's great. And then they're waiting for the guy to say, "Can I buy something?" That doesn't happen. You've got to say. Right. So what we're hoping today is we'd love to get started on trial, or would love to get the first 3 units in, or would like, what we'd like to do is if we can do this. Yeah, anyways, I mean, but you've got to ask for the order, depending on whether it's a product or service.
And again, so much, what we teach a lot in our programs, it's a lot about this mindset. And so as you've been talking with us today, it's a lot about what's happening behind the scenes. You've done your homework, you've prepared. It's not about you and what your product does. It's about understanding the buyer, understanding what's going on in their head, where they're nervous, what's causing them pain, and really, asking a lot of open-ended questions, getting that information. And then once you have all of that info, then you could say, oh gosh, well, you know what? We have something that really would address your backup problem, your this issue. Hey, let's put something together. Or is that right? Really doing the homework, getting in the mindset, so little is about that pushy, oh, I'm going to try to sell you this car that I'm going to get the bonus for. That's really not typical sales, right? It's much more of all this mindset, getting past that fear. It's not you. You may not have a product that fits their pain point. It's not about you as a person.
No, and exactly that. Like I said, I'll go through my list of little notes here at the end. But that, like I said, that's one of the biggest things. That was one of the first things we talked about, which is don't take it personally. If it's not a good fit, that's okay. And 80% of the time, the rejection, that's what it's going to be. People are polite and it's just not a good fit. Sorry, I don't want to, I've been called 3 times. I don't want to hear it. It's like, okay, great. Like I said, you are going to get people that yell and scream and don't call me again or whatever. If they've been called a lot, like we all do at home for,
telemarketer, right? I'm going to hang up. Yeah.
And so that's different. So once in a while that happens, but like I said, they'll get to a point where you focus in on the people that most likely it's going to be a good fit for the product. And so it could just be that they just bought something else or the timing's not right. I mean, you're going to get all these objections anyway. So again, it kind of goes back to that thought of if they say the timing's not right, what does that really mean? It's like, oh, can I ask, did you just buy something? It's like, oh, no, we don't have the budget. Oh, okay. So it's not that it's not a good fit. It's just that it's not right now. When is the next budget? Can we, but maybe even start a relationship at that point. To start building on that. So 6 months from now, when the budget cycle happens, you've got a little relationship with them. The other thing that I think is huge, very important is a lot of times as newer salespeople and you start memorizing all these facts about your product or your service, and they've got all of the features. And the thing you need to do is sell the benefits, not the features. So again, going to real estate where I worked on these resorts, no one wants to hear that. Well, it's we're on 2.5 miles of river. We've got 3 clubhouses. Okay, tennis courts. Okay, those are the features. What are the benefits? So instead of saying we've got 2.5 mile of river, as I've talked with these clients and I understand, maybe let's say this is the older couple with grandkids. So I might say, because you might say the feature, but then say, what does that mean for them? So I might say, we've got 2.5 miles of property along the river. And what that means is you can take sunset walks with your grandkids at night, skipping stones into the river.
Nice, nice.
Okay, because 2.5 miles of river doesn't mean a lot until I say, oh, spending time with the grandkids. Or we've got 2.5 miles of river where you have some of the biggest rainbow and blue, rainbow trout. These are 18 to 22-inch rainbow trout. It's all catch and release, but so there's things like that. So remember, that's another key point is make sure you sell the benefits, not
Don't
just
list off the color of this. I always think of it like if you were describing your phone to somebody. The features would be, oh, it's megahertz and it's pixels and blah, blah, blah. The benefit is, hey, I can call anybody in the world, right? I will never be lost again. I have a built-in production studio in my hands, right? Those are the benefits of what this thing does. What's the result of using your product, or the result of being here? Like, oh, everybody wants to get in this club, or it's not about the features. Don't list off, the items in the product. What is the result? The steak and sizzle, right? Or whatever.
Again, always comes back to it's not what information I have to get out, what's important to the person I'm talking with. And it'll be different for the next person, maybe just a little bit different, or in some cases, again, the family with young kids versus the retired, or in some cases it's completely different. And again, remembering this person wants to build, and again, I'm relating to real estate, which I do now, but relating it to somebody that wants to build versus somebody that wants a house that's completed. You can, there's going to be different things that's important. One of the things that you'll stand out as you do, I can tell you the little details matter. So when we would have some people come to stay on the property, they would stay a night or two just to kind of give them a chance to experience this development, this resort, golf course resort place on the river. So they would stay in these little cabins that we had right on the river. And so just like a hotel, some of the things we do, handwritten note when they showed up, welcoming them to the property, would have a bottle of red, bottle of white on the table, cookies, but little details. It was funny. They'd open the refrigerator door and it was stocked with waters and sodas and all different beverages. We didn't just go to that level. Part of this was because the developer that we were working with was very detail-oriented guy. Every can had to be facing the exact same way. Every water bottle had to be, which sounds, it's like, okay, that's a little much. I can tell you, I had more people comment on, oh yeah, when we opened the bottle, the wine was great. We opened the door and all of the soda was, facing the same way. It's crazy. But we had things, and again, talk about, and the other thing, not just the little details, but I'd say make it special. And again, I'm going to relate an example to the real estate, but this will be the same thing about how Kenny made his presentation special. How do you make your discussion with your boss special? How do you make something memorable so that if you're asking for the promotion, different things. But one of the things we did, if we knew the family coming in had young kids. So one of the things that, again, it's funny, we have this $20 million golf course and these incredible $15 million clubhouses with the latest, greatest technology. But we had this river that was really special. So one of the things we had were these, I don't know, a couple $100 pedal carts that we did as we were kids. So these are pedal carts that kids would get in and you could just pedal these carts down along the river. Well, when they showed up, we had these little wooden signs. They were slate in the middle, but wood on the outside, kind of this whole be authentic and true to the brand, which is what Victory Ranch was, this outdoorsy kind of place. And we would write the kids' names. So this was Billy, this was Susie, and we had their names on the carts. And I can tell you that when the kids came up and they ran to these carts to begin with, and they're like, they saw their names on their carts, that it was for them. The next hour, these kids are just up and down riding along the path, which is what the parents wanted to see. How do I get away from the craziness of my real life? If I'm going to be on vacation, I want the kids away from their phones, away from the tablets. So I want them skipping stones in the river. I want them riding up the river. Now, again, that's what's important to a lot of the families that visited there. But those little details, the way we made that special,
Yeah.
that's what resonated with him. Because it's also like on the golf course, I've been involved now and I hear about a lot of these different communities. Everyone brags about, oh, the fourth hole was a dog leg right, and you should have seen the green, it was undulating. And yeah, the big golfers like to talk about that. But the thing that gets the most interest and the most stories is like on the fifth hole, they had this taco bar set up where they had drinks and free food. It was on the ocean, and you could just get whatever you wanted for free. Or what it's the things that make it different and special from the experience. So even if you don't have the best golf course, you can do things like that
Nice.
that make a huge difference. And so again, I
And
know that
give them
real,
something to talk
but
about,
it's the
right?
same thing
Yeah.
for your product side of, think of how it's different. How do you make it special? How do you present it special? Because all the little details make a difference.
So there's so much about being creative, really, again, the user experience, thinking of yourself as the buyer. What are you nervous about? What would you say? What would make you happy?
I'll say that you get one chance to make a first impression. I mean, it's
Right.
kind of true even on the sales side where you get a short window
Yeah.
and a short time to make this incredible presentation. Now, again, you'll learn things if it's a long-term sale, you'll learn things about the client and the business and how it works and what's important to them.
I'm thinking too about you've made that initial connection and now you're trying to, okay, nothing's happened. They're like, oh, how often can you reconnect with them? Or, how do you know kind of when you're being a pest and when it actually makes sense to follow up? Do you typically, need to have some news to share or some reason to reconnect? Or do you make a reason to reconnect? Hey, wanted to let you know we're having this sale. You talked about you were interested in this piece.
Yeah, I
Any
mean, I think
thoughts?
in today's world, it's a lot easier with social media and just emails, where whether you start a newsletter. And I think the thing that's important, and I think some of the people have been successful on some of their social media, is because when you're not trying to sell every time. So in real estate, when we do the newsletter, it's not just look at this new house, it's for sale. Do you want it? It's kind of, hey, here's an update of what's happening in this town, whether it's, Boston, whether it's Park City. Here's the local events. Here's the parade. Here's the new beer fest. Here's the, all. But it's keeping them engaged, at least so they're remembering your name. And when you call them, which I would do, like at least, it depends on different things and the product and timelines and services. But whether it's twice a year or 5 times a year, whatever it is, to follow up with good clients like that. And again, it shouldn't just be hey, I just wanted to check in, because people might look at that and say, I'm busy. I can't have my realtor calling to check in, as well as the guy that does my roofing, along with the guy, my car dealership guy, if they're all good salespeople following up. So it might be I want to let you know about the new clubhouse. If you ever get a chance to swing by, that's great. Or, hey, our product is going to be, or something like that, where you're
Some
not
kind of value, right? So there's some
add some
value.
value. And again, on the constant updates of the emails, and again, whether it's once a month, you don't want it to be too often, because unfortunately people getting, bogged down in these emails. But again, something where you're not trying to sell. It's just, you might throw in a little bit about some of your successes or some things that are going on, but it's more informational about not just you or your product or your service, but the community and the overall kind of atmosphere. And again, my thing with real estate may not apply to some other people and what they have to do, but I think you get the idea, where at least your name and your company is in front of them frequently enough that's what you want.
Well, and another nice takeaway from that thought is becoming a thought leader, right? So as you're, regardless of the business you're in, sending, the latest trends, or maybe it's, you could be creative and come up with, hey, whatever that industry is, you might have special insight that you could share. So a connection that delivers value, anyone can do that, right? You could start sharing. Here's an article. I thought of you. I thought you might find it interesting.
And one of the things I'm going to say in a follow-up, I'm kind of old school. And so, yes, texts and emails are fine. I can tell you it's incredibly impressive, going old school with a thank you note. One of the things I did for my team is, I forget the name of the stationery company online, but you just had some stationery made with their name kind of embossed in it. So it wasn't it was just very classy, embossed with their name, but handwritten notes, thank you so much for visiting, or thanks so much for the time of this meeting, whatever. And I can tell you, so my son, who is your nephew, Ryan, so he was applying for a job with a marketing company. This was first out of college, up in San Francisco. And he had gone two interviews in, had done very well. They were excited about it. And after the last interview we had, and there were two new people on this call. And when Ryan went to, I said, "Hey, did you send your thank you notes?" He goes, "Well, I sent him an email." And I said, "Okay, well, did you send it to everybody in the meeting?" And he said, "Well, I didn't know the one woman, so I didn't include her, but I wrote in one of the people that I wrote to, I just said, oh, and tell the other person, I appreciated the time." And so I told him, I said, "Ryan, call the receptionist or look online, whatever, and find out who that person's name is, get the email and send, a thank you note or an email, whatever." He didn't.
Yeah.
And not that I'm always right, but it's like in terms of how important the follow-up is, well, he didn't get the job. And he was kind of, stumped and what. And so we had, it was like, "Ryan, call and find out so you can know what you did better." And so he even asked, he said, "Hey, I love the company and I thought things were great. Sorry I didn't get the job. Can I just ask you so I can know for the future? Was there something I could have done?" And whatever. And they said, "Well, Ryan, I'll tell you, we actually looked because you didn't send this other person a note. We looked at that as a microaggression, meaning that, and it just a weird thing, but in today's world where, in the old days, people would put an ad, this is way before the internet, right? I mean, it was whether it was, friend referral or in the newspaper or wherever you'd, advertise jobs. Now, between online and AI, every job gets 1,000 applicants. You've got to stand out. You've got to do these things. You've got to do the basics, which is, do your homework, make sure you know what the job's about, make sure you do all these things. And then again, I think follow up is, make sure they know how excited you are about this job. It's not just the money, because if it's the money, you'll leave for somebody else if they pay you,
Right.
$10,000 or more, or $5 an hour or more, whatever it is. But you're excited about this company. And here's why I'm excited about it. Here's why I want this job and why, because when I'm excited about it, they know I'm going to work hard. And then again, that follow up, whether it's for a job, whether it's for a meeting, or whether it's for a sale, even if you don't get, so let's say somebody came out and visited where I was, the Victory Ranch where I was, and I didn't do it all the time. I wish I had, but if they didn't, you can still write a note to say, "It was great meeting you. I know you're buying this other development. I hope it works out great for you. If I can ever be of assistance, please let me know," that kind of thing. So it makes a big difference.
It's so true. And I think it goes also back to things like testimonials, right? And so as someone, back to what we originally talked about, people buying from people, right? And I want to trust you and have you follow through. And then when you've done something good, going back and either getting a testimonial or asking them, "Hey, are there other people that you might connect me with?" I recently had something where I had a student from years ago who I helped during the time of the program had reached out to her new employer, a big company, and made an introduction for me because I had treated her well and helped her out. Again, it's like you kept talking about, going that extra mile, standing out, being memorable.
And there are going to be times that you do all the right things and it just doesn't work out. But like you said, sometimes things out of the blue, a year, two, a couple of years later, you may not see the results of them a couple of months where you're like, "Hey, I referred a guy to this other development. They bought over there. I haven't seen anything." The other thing I would say is to kind of keep your eyes open for the different opportunities. So for instance, I was selling real estate at Victory Ranch and in Promontory. But one of the best things I did is quickly realize, hey, the value's going up. And so we built a couple of spec homes, which was even better than the job I had. But again, you kind of keep your eyes open for different opportunities. Yeah. And then sometimes you'll take a step backwards. So another example is after I'd sold the company, it was a small company, but in Southern California. And after I'd sold that, I had a non-compete in the technology field. I didn't know what I was going to do, but we moved out to Park City. And partly I needed health insurance. And so the first job I took was I was a sales assistant. So I'd been selling at that point for, I don't know, 15 or 20 years. And so I had to take a job as a sales assistant for a couple of these realtors at this development. I was paid $28,000 a year. So this was 2003, which was still way below market value. And I was basically writing thank you notes, stuffing envelopes, doing whatever for these salespeople, which was humbling very quickly.
So you had owned a company, you sold a big technology company, and you said, "You know what? I know what I need to do in order to get into this development. I have to start at the bottom because that's what's available."
Right. And so I was there about 6 months, and I went to the director of sales, and I said, and I obviously just to be an assistant, you have to get your real estate license. So I did that, and I said, I'd really like to be outside, now, because now it's one thing if I just said, hey, I'm going to sell. It's like, well, you don't know the development and the property and the, all the acreage and all the things you need to know about this property or about real estate. But at least I had a little background now after 6 months. And I said, I really want to, be an agent and sell. And I said, and I'll do it 100% commission. Nobody was on 100% commission. It was salary and you got a certain point. I said, so that quickly said to that person, to the director of sales, one, I'm that excited about this opportunity that I'll do 100% commission. If I don't sell anything, I don't make anything. So it's a pretty, again, knowing what's important to him, which is, do I take another salesperson on the team that I'm going to have to, whatever the salary was at the time, how do I justify that? Versus saying, hey, if this guy's going to go 100% commission, there's no downside to that person. And so things like that. And again, it was during the time of 2004 to 2008 when the real estate market was going crazy. And so it worked out really well until we had the crash in 2008. But things like that where, yeah, sometimes you might have to take a step back and it's, go back to, like we talked about, practice, whether it's with friends and family, and do it real life where it's, hey, okay, you're going to be customer A. I don't know anything about you, whether it's me and you or whether you're a friend or wife or husband, and really practice it. And it's the thing that I think a lot of people have a problem with in the beginning is that, they try to memorize it. Because I know some of the times you hear these salespeople, it's like reading a script, and it's like that's not, I don't think that's the best way to do it. But it's like, if you fumble a little, that's okay. So the other thing I would say is, of all the things we've talked about, new business is absolutely the toughest to get, right? I mean, you're new to this person, your product is new, your company's new, all of these things. And so you got to quickly gain that trust, or however long it takes. But that's a whole new process. So the thing I would say is, one, look at your existing clients. Are there things you can do to help them with your products, whether it's, let's go back to the thing of, they've already bought, let's say in the networking side, they bought this network, but how important is redundancy to them? So, because maybe we could sell a whole extra system, not just because, yes, it's a sale, but it's like, if that's going to help them, from that $20,000 an hour that they lose for downtime. So the best thing to do is work with your existing customers. Then the next thing after that is, I would say, is referrals. So whether it's, again, in the real estate world, that's incredible for referrals, but all these other, a lot of, it's so funny how people, they make these great sales, they have these great connections, and they don't even ask their clients for referrals, which sometimes, because like I said, the one I just got from a client from 4 years ago. Yeah. Now, again, quickly in the back of my mind, I'm like, I got to go back through my whole list and
right.
go to the people and just, remind them, hey, I'm still here. Even though I'm not working at that resort directly, I can still sell in that resort. I can sell anywhere else, real estate. But, these referrals are incredible. So that's the best way. Then, from there, then you kind of take it from, how do you get other people helping network for you? And whether that's in the real estate world, when I was working at a development, get other real estate agents to understand our product, whether, it can be different, whether it's your LinkedIn community, letting them know what's going on, to, things like that, and connecting. So, but then it also comes down to, there are times, like I said, it's tough in the beginning. I get it, scary. Everything's scary, new is scary, but this is just two people having a conversation and me taking the time to show that, and I've put the energy in to say that it's important to me to understand what you really need or how this might help you, and asking the right questions, figuring it out. Because like I said, if it's not a good fit, that's okay. But asking the right questions and figuring out quickly just means I don't waste any more of your time. You don't waste any more of my time, and you'll move on and I'll move on. And that's okay. We'll keep in touch, because maybe you'll know somebody that it's a good fit for and you can refer them. Or I might know somebody that's a good fit for, if I don't get this job, I might know somebody I'll refer, so it's just making these connections, which is neat.
Some of the great takeaways I've gotten from this, really, it's about, that mindset and that doing your homework, repetition, it gets better. And, there's a lot of tactical things we can do. But nothing is better than, hey, just getting out there and starting, right? Yep. Pick up the phone call, open the email, and just, push past that fear and just start. Just get out there, and, you'll stumble through the first few.
The other thing, it's always, people talk about, well, if you're dealing with an executive and people were nervous because they don't know if they're going to be interesting enough. And one of the things I've always heard is, remember, but you can be interested.
Yes.
So asking the questions, and people do like to talk about themselves and their business, and if it's something they're passionate about. And so you can be interested in that. And that's how the conversation gets started. Sell the benefits, not just the features of what you're working with, the little details. We talked about the little pedal cars, and
Billy and
all
Susie.
the
Yep.
details make a big difference. Follow up. Again, sometimes the person selling has to say no. Again, you just don't
Yep.
want to waste your time. Make sure you're dealing with the right person that can make the decision. Sometimes people will tell you they're going to make the decision and they don't make the decision. It's because if they say, "Oh yeah," and all I have to do is present it to my, and that's happened to me too. I mean, you work with them over a couple of months. Like, great, now I just have to present it to my boss, and we'll say it's like I
Oh,
wasn't doing the right person, right?
yeah.
So make sure, because now you have to start over again, and
Right.
the boss may have already got a friend or a friend or a friend, or there's a connection that they're going to buy from somebody else no matter what you do. And so
Yeah.
you weren't dealing with the right person. Talked about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And this is why you role play, but it's like, what questions are they going to ask
Yeah.
me? What's important to them? But that's the thing, because just so that you're not stumped. And again, that'll happen and that's okay. But it's to say, I want this promotion. They're going to say the best case scenario, we know what they're going to say, but it's like, what are the concerns they're going to have? It's like, if I promote you, I have to promote them. I can't do it because this. It's like, okay, so what can I do to make myself more important to the company, or whether it's take on more responsibility or do something, whether it's again at a minimum just showing that what the other industry average makes,
Right.
what you've done for the company, what you're going to,
Because
things
then
like
they're
that.
going to have to go present it to their boss or to HR, right? They're like, oh,
Yep.
there's no bonuses. Well, so you have to give them the stats so that they can go, sell someone else. Yeah.
And again, I realize the example I gave of saying, okay, I'll go 100% commission, that's an easy decision for that person to make. But sometimes it's just a little, just giving a little bit of
Yeah.
what'll make that easier for them to make that decision. Remember, we go back to make the decision easy.
Right.
That
Right.
changed
Keep it
everything in the
simple.
real estate world, where the reason people were hesitant is because they didn't know if they were getting the best deal or should they buy or not. Because as soon as we took that out of the equation, where it's like, you don't have to worry if the guy before you got a better deal or the guy after you got a better deal, because we just took that out and
Right.
said, and that changed everything. It skyrocketed. And so again, another thing I can kind of do is to say, ask some of the people that didn't buy from you in a polite way, to say, this is not to pressure you to change your mind. I'm just curious, what could I have done
Right.
differently? Or could I have done something different? What, to make it, so at least you'll learn from that. They might
Right.
say,
Right.
you just seem so nervous. I don't think they'd say that, but if it is, it's like, okay, great, just
Right.
practice
Right.
more. If they say, you didn't seem interested, or you didn't, or whatever it was, but
Right. Right.
learn from that, especially if you hear it over and over from a couple people, is that you didn't seem prepared. It's like, okay, great. I thought spending 5 minutes on a website looking at their keywords
Yeah.
was enough. Maybe I really need to understand their business. And so, different things, but it's helpful.
This has been fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much. You're really going to be helping, especially I do a lot with sort of these our young entrepreneurs who, you're saying, hey, you might be starting from scratch. You might be, at the, new guy in the door, and you can make a difference. You can be creative. You can use a lot of these tips we talked about. But you just got to get out there and start and
Yep.
push those fears, take a deep breath, jump in. First few, you're going to stumble and you may get a lot of rejections and whatnot, but it's not
I can
you.
tell you no higher ups. I mean, there's some downs for sure. When you get dejected, you put in a lot of work, you spend a lot of time, and they don't buy from you. It's a low.
Yeah.
The high highs you get after doing the work, doing the right thing, making your quota, whatever, it's incredible. And so, like I said, it's one of those jobs where, you either love it or it's not a good fit for you, but the rewards you get, not just because of the potential income or things like that, but you do get to see the results of your work. And again, sometimes it's not always fair. You work really hard and you don't get the sale. Other times you get a referral and it's 5 minutes and
Yeah.
someone's going to buy from you. Like, I didn't work too hard, and those aren't the ones you appreciate as much. The ones that you work hard, you strategize, you sneak in the back door of the pharmaceutical company, and the guys that were going to try to take a deal from you, you take the deal from them. Those are the ones you remember. Those are fun. The other thing I thought would be fun for your audience, Aaron, is maybe tell them the story about when you went to the Tonight Show with me and doing a little panic mode. I
When I
can't
was a
remember.
little nervous, so Jim is what you would call a prankster. And we have many stories of, I think that's where, your confidence, you've got a reputation. Oh, Jim Moran will get it done, or Jim Moran will make that happen, or magic things happen when you're around Jim. I remember standing in a long line at Rockefeller Center trying to go skating, and there's 50 people in front of us, and we come up and Jim's like, well, no, we got this. And all of a sudden, magically, we're putting on skates and getting out there. Like, what did you do? And it's like, oh, I
Well,
our way in.
I'm standing with a potential Olympic skater that wants to test the ice. They'll let her on.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really great and informative, and really appreciate spending some time with us.
Great. I hope it helps, and I wish all the people that are new to sales or getting into it, I hope it works out well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jim.
Take care.